Hey everyone, I'm super excited to welcome you today to our very first podcast. My name's Tim, and I'm the co founder of New Creative. We're a brand and marketing agency based in London. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by Shane Solomon of Corker Media. And today our podcast is going to be really focusing in on, I guess, a bit of an idiot's guide to podcasting, because as you can see, this is my first time, but Shane's the expert and he's going to tell us all the tricks of the trade. So, Shane, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be on your first ever podcast. I'm honored. And of course, I am that idiot that loves doing podcasting, production in particular. And so my background is 20 years in the content production industry. And that specializes in making content to go on websites, social media, and it complements any marketing strategy you may have with amazing companies like yourself.
And you're based in Cornwall, I believe?
In beautiful Cornwall, where we have the best of both worlds. You know, we're super connected to London with our airport. It's literally 50 minutes by plane into Gatwick, but we have that magical view of the beaches, the fields, that peaceful kind of setting, but literally an hour away from the hustle and bustle and
Stone's
the
throw.
lights. Yeah, it's great. It's really,
Stone's
really good.
throw, 4.5 hour drive down the
Well,
whichever
yeah, but
motorway.
with a lot of the equipment, normally it's really, not ideal to go taking planes and trains.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have to drive it. And yes, the realistic time is about 4.5 hours, 5 hours. But, like anything, the more you do it, the more it becomes natural. And you just think, just
Yeah.
crack on with it,
So, for the benefit of our audience today,
Mm,
treat me, the novice
okay.
podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this for years.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the world is so oversaturated with content at the moment. We all feel so much pressure to be producing content day
Mm,
in, day out for web,
mm.
there's just too much, isn't there?
Sure. Yeah.
But podcasting is going to be a great way for our clients, particularly in the B2B space, to be really connecting with their audience and telling stories.
Mm.
So from your experience, what is it that a podcast can really, help our clients achieve?
Okay, I think the most important thing is the messaging, and getting the message out there, what problem you can solve for your clients, potential clients or existing clients, and do that in a precise way where you're not trying to give too much away. And this is where podcasting is great because you do it in episodes, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to bombard everyone with as much information that's in your head as possible because it's too much. So you do that in bite-sized chunks. And a great way to do with your strategy is to kind of come up with a topic for each podcast. So, for example, your first one is a few tips and tricks about podcasting.
Yeah.
So that the listener or the viewer in this case know exactly what kind of content they're going to be consuming in that podcast. And again, people's retention, we're bombarded with all these messages. We're really focused now on getting the information we want and then getting out of it again. So, my first tip with podcasting is to keep it to the length that it needs to be.
Okay.
So
So how
many,
long is that?
well, it research says if you look into it, between 15 and 20 minutes is the optimum kind of time.
Yeah.
So many people are like, well, if I do a podcast, I've got so much to say, I don't want to do an hour podcast and things like that. It only needs to be as long as it needs to be. So really get in there, get the content that you want to get out there, the messaging, and then get back out again. Sure, do other episodes. And this is the other thing, it's over a longevity of podcasting that you build up that content. You're not going to do it in one go because people won't
Yeah. Yeah.
consume it in one go,
Yeah.
you know? So that's one tip.
Yeah. So I think from my own experience,
Hmm.
I've dipped my toe in with some video. We work with clients all the time on different types of content and things like that. And I guess
Hmm.
what we see is one of the biggest barriers, I think, is that kind of fear factor.
Yes.
Getting in front of camera is really, really difficult. I think, if you go and do a photo shoot, you go and do, a bit of, video work with pieces to camera, talking head style, etc. I think a lot of the time we see that clients are just, quite fearful, very uncomfortable of being in that situation. So would you say podcasting is a bit of a kind of easier intro into having to produce video content and maybe takes away some of those fears?
100% yes, because it's relaxed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you put an in there or something like that,
So it
or let
doesn't
me
have
just
to be
check my notes.
perfect.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't, because it's conversational.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it. So it's not a corporate polished production. It's just an honest conversation of content that you're passionate about. And I find when people talk about what they're passionate about, then they just do it naturally.
Yeah.
And again, it comes with working with good people that can give you good counsel on advice before you start shooting a podcast. For example, working with yourselves and working with us, we can give people that kind of, reassurance of what to do before you go live and things like
Get
that.
people comfortable.
Yeah. So we're not looking at cameras now. We're talking to each other as if we would be in a meeting anyway.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of gets rid of that fear factor of having to be perfect. And I've made loads of clangers on podcasts. And I just say, do you know what? Whoever's producing, in this particular case, it's Jay today.
Yeah.
Just leave it in there. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And do you think actually that makes the content more real and therefore is kind of actually better to watch and more interesting to watch because it's, it's got that authenticity?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely that. And if you do get a clanger and you get lucky, you might even go viral online
Yeah.
and hit gold before you even know it. But, it's one of those things. I think there's a great saying I live by, and that is to get comfortable, we have to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you want to reach that next goal, sometimes we just have to step out of our comfort zone. And another thing to be aware of with podcasts, even though it's blowing up right now in terms of people consuming podcasts, because it's great on the way to work, whether you're listening to it,
Yeah.
if you're in the gym and you're doing a 20-minute workout or things like that, is the amount of people in the industries that are actually producing podcasts have actually gone down.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, why do you think that is?
Because it's too much effort.
Right.
So people start it saying, I want to do all this.
But they don't carry on.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's consistency. So now there's never been a better time because people listening to podcasts and searching for podcasts in the niche is going up.
Yeah.
But the amount of people producing valuable content has gone down.
Yeah, yeah.
So it gives you a chance in your industry to really take a slice of that content.
Yeah, interesting.
And go for it. But you've got to be consistent. It's like anything. You don't do an advertising campaign for a one-off week somewhere.
Yeah, and then just stop. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're managing a social media campaign for someone, but you might be also orchestrating a billboard campaign in London on these big LED screens, you might be doing something, in a theatre program or whatever. So those exposures in marketing world still to 7 to 8 exposures that people see things popping up. It's the same thing with podcast. You can't just do one and expect to be Josh Rogan, right? It takes time to build.
So in order to get that consistency, how do we make people's lives easier to kind of do that and stick with it and, ensure that it's getting done, every month or, whatever the frequency might be? Is there a way that we can, is it simply, is it working with a partner like you guys in order to help? Because I guess there's so many things to think about, not just, the topic, what we're going to say, but that setup piece, the complexities in there really has to be done by a professional like yourself.
It's working together, and this is where New Creative and Corker Media have worked really well together so far. And a huge thanks to Lawrence Finn, actually, in the Sporting Club for putting us together, because we're both members of that. And Lawrence played a big part in kind of putting us together.
That's right.
And that's where the kind of collaboration is key, because you can work together to achieve great things. Now, what we've found works really well is that at the end of the day, busy professionals are busy. So they don't have time to do a podcast every week and keep coming back to a studio setup like we have here today.
Yeah.
So for them, they find it easier when we kind of block book it and we say, look, we've got a half day a month.
Yeah.
And you can do all 4 episodes in one sitting.
Yeah.
You can change your shirt if you want to, but people
Good tip.
you can do that.
Have
So
you got a few with you today?
Funny enough, I have. So, you bring 4 shirts with you and you just do that change. So
Yeah.
it looks like you've done.
I didn't get that message.
Well, we'll work on this one. Partly my fault, your mistake. But, so, that's what it's all about, really. It's making it easy for the client. Because at the end of the day, people can do their own podcasts at home.
Yeah.
But they can't be bothered to edit it. What we find with our clients now is they just like the idea of having a setup they can walk into, shoot the content and go again and get back to doing what they do. And then this then gets processed, for both audio, visual by a wonderful editor such as Jay.
And do you think, in terms of, let's say we're, if I think of our audience, we're a B2B company, you're trying to think about planning a podcast, should these businesses just be thinking about, talking about themselves and, what they're up to and what they do for their clients? Or is this an opportunity for them to, speak to their customers and, invite conversation with, other industry figures and leaders? Are there any tips around, the who, the what, and the why that should help somebody develop that podcast or that idea?
That is a great question. And the answer to that really is always about your guests.
Yeah.
Make it about them. We don't want to be talking about ourselves. You just subtly put that in where it's appropriate. And bearing in mind, this is something for you as a brand for yourself to put out as content. So it's always about your guests and what they're kind of solving the problem is for the marketplace.
Yeah.
How they add value to the marketplace and their story, interesting stories, things like that. So it's always about the guests. Yes, you can put the odd reference to say here at New Creative we do that sort of things. That's fine. Get a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
cheeky plug in there. But over time, your podcast will become the brand that people get used to anyway. So they'll know that you do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always about your guests really and trying to extract as much from them as possible, which by the way, you're doing a great job on me. So
And what about the beyond the podcast? So I guess, there's that, you're going to come on, you're going to, have a subject, you're going to deliver a 15-20 minute podcast.
Mhm.
Suddenly you've got this content. What do we do with it? What channels? What's the strategy? What should our clients be thinking about in terms of how to then, position and market that content?
Sure. Another great question. So once you've created this content, it looks and sounds good. And the other reason why we video the podcast now is that it's kind of multi kind of platform content. So you can
Yeah.
now put it onto YouTube. Not only can you hear it on Spotify and all the major podcasting platforms, you can watch it, but you can take little clips. So from our podcast today, there'll be certain chunks that we can use
Yeah.
for your reels. Because at the end of the day, you've got to promote that they're there.
Yeah.
And you use your existing social platforms to start informing your people. But the best way to really start hitting a new audience that you could potentially work with is to make sure you bring people onto your show that do have a good social media platform already
Yeah.
and guests that have a good following, because those people will then be hitting their networks when they're on your show because they want to show it.
Of course. Yeah.
So again, it's a slow build and slow strategy in terms of views, but you can also use it for your pay per click campaigns, which
Yeah.
I know at New Creative you guys are absolutely experts on building campaigns, marketing campaigns online that you can drive traffic to.
Yeah.
So, for me, it's always about a sustainable growth by inviting good people on, cross networking. So in this podcast today, I've already mentioned a guy called Lawrence Finn. I know he's great on sharing content that he's been mentioned because he likes being bigged up and he's a great networker
Yeah.
and a great person to know. So he's going to share it. I'm going to share it. You're going to share it. The New Creative team will share it. In fact, Cork Media team will share it. So before you know it,
You've
you'll
got
pick up a
ready-made
few hundred.
audience.
Now,
Yeah.
don't expect huge things to start, but it's all about the quality over the quantity. I'd much rather have 300 engaged listeners than 3,000 people that don't care.
Absolutely. And do you find from your experience now is a podcast is becoming more about video and less about the audio almost? Is the whole format sort of changing in terms of, the way we're engaging with the podcast?
Well, experience show, statistics show that in fact the audio is still very much there
Yeah.
because you think about it, if you're on a tube, you make that commute to work.
Plug yourself
Yeah,
in.
that's right.
Yeah.
So, and it's something you can easily download. But the video element is still complementary to it because of purely for the driving the traffic
Yeah.
to it as short reels because you need the visuals. Now you could argue we could take the audio and put it to like a still image with like the kind of wave kind of sound format thing you might have seen.
Yeah.
You can do, but it's
But
not
it's
really
just less
engaging,
engaging.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
especially if it's someone in your podcast that you know or someone in your network. If you're scrolling through LinkedIn and you've got a friend who's a graphic designer who's absolutely top of his game and you see him, they're talking something, what are they talking about? It just
Yeah.
stands out. Click play.
And for the audio side, is there, a kind of recommended platform that you would suggest for people to just share the audio side of podcasts? Is there, a mainstream that, it's a go-to place?
Spotify
Yeah.
is quite popular, but like anything, if you're an iPhone user or an Android,
Yeah.
which one are you? So with iPhone, of course, we've got Apple Podcasts,
Yeah.
which all ours go on to as well, and then you've got Google Play as well. So it's important when you have a podcast that you use an agency such as yourselves working with us to make sure it's distributed to
The right.
all of them,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
all the main ones.
Yeah.
Because everyone's got their own preference, but Spotify is definitely right up there as you need to be on Spotify, really.
Yeah.
And
so if we're planning a podcast or any of our audience today are sort of watching today's show thinking, I've been thinking about podcasting for a while, everyone's talking about it, I want to get on board. What would you say the kind of first steps that people need to take to actually, start putting together a plan?
Okay, well, the first thing really is to come up with a bit of a structure. Now, I'm not a huge person that writes lots and things like that, but a kind of bullet point. If you was to kind of pick out how many episodes you're going to do, anywhere between 6 and 12
Yeah.
is a good kind of starting point. And start just picking out topics really in your industry,
Yeah.
and then just start thinking of some guests. And then start thinking of some questions, how they solve problems, and some tips and tricks. And to be honest, that's a great format to start from, really, because at the end of the day, everyone is looking for easy answers to something that they're looking to solve their problem.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You
So it's
know,
that education piece.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
How
got to be.
can you help me?
It's got, sorry to interrupt, but it's got to be freemium. It's got to be something you can give away free that builds trust and relationships with your potential clients. That eventually they'll see you as the go-to expert, and they're going to phone you for guidance and perhaps become that dream client. And the other thing, of course, to know is that most of this content we're talking about is available on YouTube anyway.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not branded as you. So you're never going to be found as the expert on YouTube or any of these platforms unless you brand your own content. So don't let the others do it. It's like golf clubs. We've just started doing some work for a golf club, but there's loads of golf tip videos on YouTube, loads of them.
Yeah. 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 Thousands.
Absolutely. But the thing is, the golf club we're working with, Porth Golf Club, for example, no one's going to know about them if their content doesn't exist within their own branding.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if there's another golf pro out there with a million hits. Start your own,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
So it's that simple. Just get started, have the willingness to do it,
Yeah,
um, work with great partners, and then give it a go.
that's right. You don't have to be great to start. You
And do you
just
need
have
a
to
name?
start to be great.
What's your thoughts around the naming a podcast? Because I've seen so many variations of, brand names, industry names, something
Mm.
funny, something quirky. Do you think it makes a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference, actually. I really believe you can overlook it, overthink it,
Yeah, yeah,
overthink it. And it always goes back for me for things such as Apple. You think when they first came up with Apple, you think, that doesn't make any sense, does it? But over
and now
time,
look at them.
it doesn't
Yeah,
matter, does it? So it's like, you can call it clapperboard, clapperboard marketing. I don't know. It could have anything. It doesn't matter. And again, you can always, rebrand at a certain stage if you're building a culture that's now got a name. So I think keep it simple, don't overthink it, and just start, because the
and
content will carry you through.
yeah. So, how much time do you think someone should put aside to actually investing in, a podcast? You know, I think, as you said, it's sort of coming back to that consistency question, which is if you're going to start it, you've got to maintain it and keep it going.
Hmm.
But if someone, I think it's that sort of unknown, isn't it? It's like, well, until you start doing something, you don't really realistically know how much time you need to invest in something.
Sure.
And I guess I can imagine a lot of scenarios where somebody has the best of intentions because they know they want to do something. They make a start, and then of course all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, this is really taking much much more of my time than I expected,
Mm.
and that's why it stops.
Hmm.
So to help people understand what a sensible amount of time to invest in producing a podcast series would be, what do you think people really need, to have?
Okay. Now, if you've got the beauty of having a team, for argument's sake, you've got a marketing person,
Yeah,
comms person that can help you with this, you can delegate it a bit, then that's one thing. But if you're like most small, medium-sized businesses here in the UK,
yeah,
that you're pretty much still doing it all yourself, then you want to be allowing possibly a day a month
yeah,
for it. And that kind of half a day is really working out who your guests are, taking time to invite them.
yeah,
And then your other half a day is giving up your time to come along to actually record it.
yeah,
So, yeah. So, from a kind of investment point of view, you want to be allowing a day
yeah.
as a one person band. Yeah, one day, half a day to invite your guests and to come up with a bit of a
Bit of a
structure.
structure for what you're going to talk about. Yeah,
And that's based on a couple of tips I've said today. And then, and just repeat that
yeah,
and be consistent. But no more than a day a month, I think you need to give to this as a kind of content marketing strategy.
yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, who can't sacrifice a day a month in order to actually put together some really meaningful content for their customers, attract a whole new audience, and start doing something new?
Exactly. And then eventually you might get famous and sell merch and, you know, do your
Buy
content
the
on
get branded t-shirts,
yeah,
get
and do it on the yacht, you know. So,
yeah.
but
Is
yeah,
that where our next episode is going to be?
why not? We know the people to make it happen. Committee Boats UK and Caribbean. Just a little shout out.
I was going to say, you must have some companies down in Cornwall that can lend you a nice yacht on, you know.
Exactly. So our people will speak to your people and we'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen.
Mm.
Brilliant. All right. Well, it's been amazing chatting to you today, Shane. Thank you so much for coming along. I
You're
don't know if you've got any
welcome.
last thoughts that you would like to give to our audience before we wrap up today.
Yes, I do. And my thoughts are how impressed I am with your first podcast, my
Oh, well,
friend.
thank you.
Because I know that you were a little bit possibly nervous, but it hasn't shown. I think you've come across really great, and I think you're an advocate for people that is about to start on that journey.
Absolutely.
But honestly,
Yeah.
you've done really good. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise.
And it's just
Well, I've been less
relaxed.
nervous than I thought I would be. So thank you for being a great, guest, co-host, guide, mentor. Thank you very much.
And I also want to say that behind the scenes, I would say probably the more glamorous one of the two is Sarah. So I just want to say massive shout out to Sarah, because I know you guys are a huge team together.
Yeah.
And without Sarah, it wouldn't happen either. So
Definitely
just a
wouldn't
big up
happen.
to Sarah. I know she's not on the screen, but just big up to Sarah because she's awesome. So, but no, you both are great, and it's been a pleasure working closely with you guys and your team as well. And may it long continue.
Thank you. Thanks again for coming along, Shane. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for joining on this, the first podcast, and we'll see you on the next.